In August 1991, a 35-year-old woman named Pam Reynolds lay in an operating room in Phoenix. A blood vessel in her brain had ballooned and was threatening to burst at any moment. To save her life, doctors attempted a highly dangerous procedure. They lowered her body temperature, stopped her heart, and completely drained the blood from her brain. To monitor her state, they taped her eyes shut and placed small speakers in her ears, blasting clicking sounds at 100 decibels. By every medical definition, Pam was clinically dead. The operation succeeded. But when Pam woke up, she recounted the procedure in perfect detail. She described the exact shape of the electric bone saw used to open her skull and repeated the specific conversations the surgical team had while she was flatlining. Her brain was completely shut down, her vision blocked, her hearing blocked. Yet she processed a flawless, real-time sensory experience of her own surgery from a vantage point hovering directly above the operating table. Pam's case is extreme, but she is far from alone. Millions of people across the globe report experiencing similar impossible phenomena during the brief window when their heart stopped beating. In 1975, a medical researcher named Dr. Raymond Moody began collecting hundreds of these accounts. He grouped these stories together under a term we still use today, the near-death experience. Patients who survive clinical death consistently report a nearly identical sequence of events. They describe passing through a long dark tunnel, emerging into a bright light, floating outside their physical bodies, and being greeted by dead relatives. Are millions of people catching a literal glimpse of an afterlife, or are we documenting the predictable mechanical breakdown of a dying organ? Medical science operates on a core assumption called the dependence thesis. This states that all human consciousness, memory, and perception strictly require a functioning physical brain. When the brain shuts down, the mind should follow. Psychologist Dr. Susan Blackmore points out that the consistency of near-death experiences actually points to a biological explanation rather than a supernatural one. Take the famous tunnel of light. This diagram shows how the human visual cortex is wired. It features a high density of processing cells dedicated to the center of our vision, and significantly fewer cells handling the edges. When a patient goes into cardiac arrest, oxygen is cut off. Because the peripheral cells are sparsely distributed, they fade out first, creating a dark border. The dense cluster of cells in the center misfire rapidly, creating the biological illusion of a bright light at the end of a dark passage. Extreme physical stress causes the brain to flood the body with endorphins, creating a feeling of intense peace. At the same time, oxygen deprivation triggers localized seizures in the temporal lobe, the specific area where memories are stored, causing a lifetime of images to play back in seconds. The peaceful journey to the afterlife appears to be the brain's chemical coping mechanism for oxygen starvation. That still leaves the out-of-body sensation. We found an explanation for that through the U.S. Navy's experiments on G-force-induced loss of consciousness, conducted by researcher James Winery. The Navy placed perfectly healthy fighter pilots inside massive human centrifuge machines. They spun these volunteers at extreme speeds until the gravitational force pulled all the blood out of their brains, causing them to pass out. When they woke up, these healthy pilots reported the exact same phenomena as cardiac arrest patients. They saw dark tunnels, bright lights, and vividly felt themselves floating outside their own bodies. You don't need to be dying to have a near-death experience. While the physical sensations are universal, the specific contents of the visions change depending on geography. Western patients often report seeing angels or St. Peter. Patients in India report being dragged before Yamraj, the Hindu god of death, and meeting underworld clerks surrounded by piles of paperwork. Because the brain hallucinates as it shuts down, it populates these visions using the specific religious and cultural expectations the person was raised on. The out-of-body experience is a mechanical hardware failure, crashing a culturally programmed software. Science explains the general mechanics of a dying brain, but it still struggles to explain the hyper-specific anomalies. To test these visions, Dr. Sam Parnia launched the AWARE study. Researchers placed hidden images flat atop high shelves in hospital rooms. If out-of-body patients were truly floating near the ceiling, they would be able to look down and identify the pictures. Over 2,000 patients were involved, but not a single person could identify the hidden images. The study found no proof of a floating consciousness. Yet, even with that data, researchers have absolutely no explanation for how Pam Reynolds saw her surgical tools while clinically dead. Pam's case remains a genuine mystery, but a gap in our scientific understanding does not automatically equal proof of a soul. As the scientific principle goes, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If our most profound glimpses of the other side are actually internal echoes of a misfiring brain, then the afterlife remains a total uncertainty. Waiting for a guaranteed paradise later becomes a massive gamble when the data suggests these visions are created within us. This uncertainty is why palliative care nurses find dying patients rarely focus on what happens next. When reflecting on their lives, the greatest regret is not living a life that was true to themselves, rather than the life expected of them. Investigating the absolute end of life offers a powerful motivation to maximize the reality we are living right now. By recognizing that this life is the only one we can verify, we gain the clarity to focus on making our own world the paradise we hope for.